I never dared to tell this story before. Not to my closest friends, not even to my own family, because every time I do, I feel like I wake it up again. But you're here, listening to me, and I suppose you deserve to know. Maybe, just maybe, by sharing it with you, that thing will finally leave me alone. It all started 3 years ago, the night I moved into the old apartment I rented downtown. It was cheap, dark, with walls stained by moisture that seemed to form faces if you stared at them long enough. I didn't care. I was desperate for a place of my own. There was one strange detail in the main room, a massive, ancient mirror. I hadn't bought it. It was already there, fixed to the wall, as if it was part of the building itself. The frame was blackened wood, carved with strange shapes that looked disturbingly like bones. Human bones, worn down, polished into grotesque patterns. The landlord told me not to remove it, that it came with the place. I laughed nervously and didn't ask any more questions. That first night, while unpacking, the mirror unsettled me. Not because of my reflection, but because there was something wrong with it. It didn't catch light the way it should. The lamp behind me seemed to dim whenever I looked at it through the glass. The whole room darkened inside the reflection. And yet my face was still there, pale, distorted. A little more gaunt than it should have been. I remember leaning closer to inspect a detail. Tiny cracks across the surface, like red veins. They looked like dried blood trapped beneath the glass. When I touched it, it was cold. Unnaturally cold, like it had been buried underground for centuries. I told myself it was nothing, just exhaustion from moving. So I turned off the lights, lay down on my makeshift mattress, and tried to sleep. But I couldn't. In the middle of the night, I heard something. A knock. As if someone had struck the mirror from the inside. I jumped up, heart pounding, and turned on the lamp. The mirror was intact, but I swear I saw something in it. Not my face, something else. A skull, cracked and hollow, veins glowing faintly red across its surface. And one single eye, burning like an ember, staring straight into me. I swallowed hard, closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, it was gone. Only my reflection. I convinced myself it had been a dream. A trick of my mind. But the next day, everything changed. That mirror began to show me things that weren't supposed to be there. When I dressed for work, I saw a background that wasn't my room. A long, endless hallway full of shadows that writhed like insects. When I washed my hands at night and passed by the mirror, my reflection smiled, even though I didn't. The first time it happened, I nearly screamed. My stomach turned to ice. My skin prickled as if pierced by needles. So I began to avoid it. I walked past it without looking. I covered it with an old sheet, but every morning, the sheet was on the floor, as if someone inside had ripped it down. One night, as I tried to sleep, I heard something I'll never forget. A scratching. Slow, constant, metallic. It came from the mirror, from inside the mirror. I got up, throat dry, and approached. The reflection was darker than usual. There was no room, no furniture, only emptiness, and those invisible claws scraping at the glass. I leaned too close, and then I saw it, a face, pressed against the glass. It looked like mine, but dead. Skin cracked, lips torn, yellow teeth showing in a grotesque grin, and the eye, that same burning red eye glowing like an open wound in the dark. I froze, paralyzed, as the thing opened its mouth and screamed. But the sound didn't come from the mirror. It came from inside my head, a muffled, piercing shriek tearing through my thoughts. I collapsed to the floor, trembling, hands clamped over my ears. When I looked up again, it was gone. But from that night on, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. It wasn't my home, it was his, and I had made the mistake of looking him in the eye. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that it was nothing but exhaustion or some kind of sleep paralysis brought on by stress. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something lived in that mirror, and it wasn't going away. The days that followed were a blur of unease. I avoided the mirror as much as I could, but avoiding it didn't stop it from noticing me. Sometimes, even when I looked away, I could feel it. That heavy weight pressing against the back of my skull as though something was staring into me, waiting for me to turn. And I did turn, always. I couldn't help it. I'd glance toward the mirror and catch things I shouldn't see. Shadows shifting in the corners, too tall, too twisted to be mine. My reflection blinking half a second too late. Sometimes its lips would move when mine didn't. Words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. Let me in. I started losing sleep. Every night the scratching returned, louder, sharper, as though the glass was about to break. Once, I woke to a single crack running through the surface, glowing faintly red. By morning, it was gone, as if it had healed itself. And the smell, that was new. A faint odor, like rotting meat, spreading across the room whenever the lights went out. I cleaned everything, scrubbed the floors, emptied the trash. But it wasn't the room, it was the mirror. That stench seeped from the glass itself, subtle but constant, like something festering on the other side. I started avoiding my apartment altogether, staying late at work, sleeping in my car. But no matter where I went, the mirror followed. Not literally. No, but in reflections. Shop windows, bathroom sinks. Even the dark surface of my phone when it powered down. For the briefest moments, I'd see him. That rotting version of me. Skin pulled tight over bone, one eye hollow, the other burning like coal, and always, always smiling. I smashed my phone once, convinced it was tricking me. I threw out my bathroom mirror, even covered the screens in my apartment. But none of it mattered. That ancient blackened frame in the living room was the anchor, the source, and it wanted me closer. One night, I made the mistake of listening. I'd been lying awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, when I heard it. Not scratching, not knocking. Something else, a whisper, soft, low, almost tender. My name. over and over again, breathed out from the mirror in a rasp that was both my voice and not. I should have covered my ears. I should have prayed, screamed, done anything but what I did. I answered. "What do you want?" I whispered back. For a moment, silence. Then the glass trembled, just slightly, as if someone had pressed their hand against the other side, and it replied, "Trade." The words sank into me like poison. I sat there in the dark, shaking, waiting for more, but nothing came. Just that one word echoing in my skull, trade. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Coffee, work, human interaction. But the world felt off. People looked different, their eyes lingering on me too long, their voices hollow. At one point, my coworker placed a hand on my shoulder, and for a split second, her skin turned gray, her face melting into that same rotten grin I'd seen in the mirror. I screamed. Everyone stared, and I realized the mirror wasn't just in my home anymore. It was bleeding into everything. That night, I returned to the apartment, determined to smash it. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a hammer, and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't in sync. He tilted his head, mocking me, lips curled into that skeletal smile. I raised the hammer. My heart was pounding, sweat dripping down my temples. And then he spoke. "Break me, and you'll take my place." My hand froze in midair. For a moment, I thought it was just my imagination. But then, his lips kept moving. The voice crawled into my ears, clearer this time, dripping with malice. "You think glass is a prison? It's a door." The hammer slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor. My reflection bent down, picked up his own hammer, and grinned wider. I ran. I left the apartment, locked the door, and didn't return for days. But no matter how far I went, the pull never stopped. That whisper in my head, repeating the word over and over again. Trade, trade, trade. And the worst part? Each time I passed a reflection, the face staring back at me wasn't mine anymore. It was his. I lasted 2 more weeks. 2 weeks of fighting sleep, fighting my own mind, fighting that damned reflection that wasn't me anymore. By then, I could barely tell which side of the glass I was on. Every morning, I'd wake up unsure if the world around me was real. People's faces seemed to blur at the edges, their eyes hollow, their voices warped. I'd look in the bathroom sink while washing my hands and see his grin instead of mine. Sometimes his lips would move, whispering things only I could hear. "You don't belong here anymore. This body is mine. Trade." I tried to resist. I burned sage, brought a priest, even considered shattering the mirror despite the warning. But the priest wouldn't even step into the room. He said something was wrong, deeply wrong, and that whatever lived inside that glass wasn't human. He left without another word. That was the moment I realized I was alone. And he knew it. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the mirror in the dark. No lamps, no candles, no distractions. Just me and him. My reflection stood perfectly still, though I was breathing hard, trembling. Its eye glowed faintly red, cracked spiderwebbing across its skull. It was patient. It always had been. Finally, I spoke. "What do you want from me?" And for the first time, it laughed. It was the sound of dry bones grinding together, hollow and cruel. The glass rippled like water stirred by wind, and the reflection leaned closer, closer than should have been possible. "You," it hissed. I tried to look away, but something in its gaze held me. That burning eye seared into me, rooting me to the spot. My chest tightened, my heartbeat slowed, and suddenly I wasn't sitting on my couch anymore. I was in the mirror. The shift was subtle at first. My living room stretched like melting wax, the colors dull and gray. The air was heavy, tasting of iron and ash. Behind the glass, everything was wrong, silent, still, as though the world outside no longer existed. And my reflection? It was smiling wider than ever, standing where I had been sitting, alive, breathing, wearing my skin. "No," I screamed, pounding against the glass from the inside. "No, you can't." But my fists made no sound. My screams went unheard. I watched in horror as he picked up my phone, tested my voice, my mannerisms, my smile. It was flawless, perfect. He wasn't pretending to be me. He was me, and I was nothing but the shadow left behind. Days passed, or maybe hours. Time doesn't work the same in here. The mirror world doesn't change. It's just an endless reflection of what's outside, but hollow, faded, lifeless. I wandered the gray corridors of my apartment, unable to leave, always ending up back in front of the glass, watching him live my life. I saw him go to work. I saw him laugh with my coworkers. I saw him flirt, drink, walk under the sun as if he had always been meant to. And I was the prisoner now. But the worst part wasn't losing my life. It was knowing he was better at being me than I ever was. He smiled more. He looked confident, charming, alive. Nobody suspected a thing. Nobody saw that behind his left eye. The faintest red glow flickered, pulsing like a heartbeat. I screamed at strangers through the glass. I pounded on windows, begged for help when someone walked past a reflection. But no one ever heard me. At best, they'd pause, glance at the glass for a moment, frown, and then move on, forgetting me instantly. That's when I realized the truth. The mirror doesn't just trap you, it erases you. Bit by bit, I began to fade. My voice grew thin, my body more skeletal, my skin cracking like his had once been. The eye, oh God, the eye. One of mine blackened and fell into darkness, while the other began to burn red. I'm becoming him, the thing that once begged for a trade, the thing that smiled at me through the glass. And soon, I'll be nothing but the face waiting on the other side. That's why I'm telling you this, because maybe, just maybe, you'll listen. If you ever find an old mirror in a room you don't recognize, leave it. If you hear whispers when you're alone, don't answer. And if you ever see a face staring back at you that isn't yours, run. Because once you look it in the eye, it never lets you go. And if you're hearing me now, it means you've already looked too long.
subscribe to Horror Story Bar.